Honestly, the Duel Giant has one of the best characters designs in Season 1 of Yu-Gi-Oh! GX.
Tearing my skin. Yeah, never say die. Gotta go.
That's right, everybody. The Duel Giant will be in our tournament. Yeah, the Duel Giant from Season 1 of GX, which turns out it was just two guys. No, it was one big guy in a bunch of freaking a bunch of Obelisk Blue outfits, and one little guy telling him what to do because he was a better duelist. So, this combo of theirs actually ended up making a quite weird deck, because it is a mixture of both of the decks they showed off. The deck they showed off as the Duel Giant, and the deck they showed off as just Beauregard and Briar. It's mostly Briar cards because he's the only one that dueled on screen. So here we go. This is their decks put together to make the Duel Giant, plus a couple of the rare cards they stole because they needed some spell trap card support that they did not show off. So here we go. This is it. They have Warrior Die Greffer. They have Goblin Calligrapher. They have the Giant Orc. They have the Mad Sword Beast. They have the Big Shield Gardna. They have the Gillosaurus. They have the Second Goblin. And they have their boss monster, the Goblin King, which starts off pretty weak, but for every fiend monster on the field that you control, they get 1,000 attack and defense and cannot be attacked as long as they have, oh no, it's just field monsters on the field, not the ones that you control. That fiend monsters on the field, that's crazy. That is actually good. Especially since there are a lot of characters that run fiend decks. This guy can counter those fiend decks. And this card cannot be attacked as long as you control other fiend monsters, so that's pretty good. Now, that does not mean that they have a lot of fiends in their deck. Sadly, they did not show off very many, but they do have enough fiends that I could give to them and stuff like that. So, let's go ahead and get into what they're about. Rare card-wise, I would say that they got the Fairy Meteor Crush and they got the Divine Wrath, which will come in handy quite a bit in this kind of a tournament. They have Hollowed Life Barrier, which is basically just worse Waboku. It does the same thing as Waboku, but you must discard a card. But, overall, it's still nice to have. You're definitely going to want that. And, they got some pretty good monsters. Giant Orc being probably their best monster, and Second Goblin, which can help that Giant Orc quite a bit. But overall, I would say not the best deck. Overall, it needs some help. It needs a lot of help. But it's okay, because these are the cards they showed off. These are the cards they used. Let's go ahead and talk more about what their deck can do through their stats. So going on to their attack stat, as you can see, the Giant Orc is definitely going to affect that attack stat a lot because of its 2200 attack. But they also run monsters with 100 attack and monsters with 400 attacks, so that kind of brings down their average, including Big Shield Gardner with the 100. But they have Warrior Die Greffer, which buffs it back up with the 17. That's pretty nice. The Mad Sword Beast and Gillosaurus aren't very good, sadly, but at least they don't have 100 attack or 400 attack, so that's kind of weird too. And the Goblin King is only based on how many fiends you have, which they don't own too many of. They have 9 fiend monsters, not including Goblin King, but Goblin King can buff Goblin King, so that's good, but they can't buff themselves. So they don't get 1,000 just for being summoned. They need to have other monsters on the field, other fiend monsters. Overall, I can give this deck, because of the weird mix of high attack and low attack, a solid average 4 bars. This Duel Giant deck has a 4 bar in attack, only because Giant Orc is like destroying them with all this attack stat. Yes, I know there are a lot of monsters bringing that attack stat down, but Goblin King has a potential of 4,000 attack for you, and even more attack based on what kind of cards your opponent uses. And a lot of opponents in this series specifically do use Fiend monsters, so they are going to get that buff quite often. So that's kind of nice. So average attack stat, I'm being generous, but that's okay. I'm used to being generous with most characters, especially the one-off characters that didn't get to show off a lot of cards. I like to be generous with them. So let's go ahead and move on to the defense stat, which, looking at the defenses, 16 is not bad, 400 is terrible, 0 is awful, 1200 is not great, 2600 is beyond god tier for a level 4, 400 is not good, and 100 is not good, and this is 1,000 attack and defense, so if I'm going to say the attack stats could be amazing, the defense stat could be amazing as well. The potential is there. But Big Shield Gardna is one of the best cards in the game for defense. Not even a Blade Edge can beat it. Even though it does have a bad effect in some ways because, you know, you can just pop it. I mean, you can force it into attack mode by attacking it. They got Hallowed Life Barrier, which is a great defensive card, giving you a turn to put it back into defense mode to do its job again. So, overall, I can actually give them an above average 5 defense. I would have given them more if their defense average wasn't destroyed by Giant Orc, Second Goblin, and Goblin Calligrapher. These cards are just awful. Hell, Gillosaurus ain't doing them any favors either. But the Big Shield Gardna mixed with the helpful defense cards is really good, and Goblin King has the potential to have a shit ton of defense. So overall, I can give them an above average defense stat, which is freaking awesome. But then that's where we need to get into the speed stat. And the speed stat is awkward because they actually do have speed cards called Gillosaurus. Gillosaurus is a free special summon. Yes, it can make your opponent special summon as well, but turn 1 through 4 maybe is pretty much a free special summon. This card is really nice for that. They have Graceful Charity, which is a super fast card. It goes on top of Pot of Greed. So the fact that they have Graceful Charity means that they actually do have a lot of draw potential, which is speed. They have the Shallow Grave, which is a special summon from the graveyard. You can ignore Monster Born, everybody has some version of it, but the Shallow Grave is an add-on, which means that they actually get a buff from that. They have Call of the Haunted on top of that. That's another add-on. That's really good, especially if you're running Giant Orc. You kind of want Call of the Haunted, that way you could summon Second Goblin, or the other way around, and then make the combo happen with the Union monster. It's pretty solid. So, overall, this deck is not the slowest in the world. It actually does have some nice speed. Even though this speed sometimes, and yeah, Union monsters can count as speed too, but even though this speed does come with consequences, you know, Grace of Charity, yeah, you're drawing 3, but you're throwing 2. That's not a bad effect. Shallow Grave, your opponent gets to special summon with you. Gillosaurus, your opponent might be able to special summon with you. But Call the Haunted's a freebie, so that definitely gets their speed up. Overall, I'm going to give their speed potential a solid 5 bars. They've earned it. This is a fast deck. This deck is either going to win very quickly or stall a little bit so that you could get your bigger monsters faster. It's actually pretty good, or give you time to bring out the Goblin King. It's actually pretty good. I could see this deck being decent in terms of speed. I'm going to give it a solid 5 stars. Plus, Muko's funny. It can stop your opponent's speed stat, which that's not what this stat's about, but it's just fun to mention. So let's go ahead and move on to the Duel Giants skill stat. And the skill stat actually does get affected because Mad Sword Beast does piercing damage. Piercing damage does affect the skill stat. Guess what? Fairy Meteor Crush makes your monsters do piercing damage. Piercing damage does affect the skill stat. Burn. Judgment of Anubis. It's a burn card. That affects the skill stat. For those of you that don't know what it does, boom, it's on the screen. What it does is basically when one of your spell and trap cards, or a lot of them, are about to be destroyed, flip this card, counter it so the opponent's spell or the destruction card gets destroyed, and destroy one face-up monster on your opponent's side of the field, and they take burn damage based on their attack stat. Freaking awesome. A really good card for protecting your back row of Hallowed Life Barriers. So overall, with these combos, with this skill, I actually can give them a little bit of skill. Now, they're not going to win any duels by the skill stat, so I can't really even give them an average skill stat. I'm going to go below average of 3 because Mad Sword Beast is not very powerful. Fairy Meteor Crush is nice, but it's not too often that you're going to be able to pull that off with an effective monster, that is. And Judgment of Anubis is situational, so it's not the fastest thing either. So their deck is not about skill. It's not about that. Their deck is more about attack and defense. Attack and defense. So that is basically what they are. The sword and the shield. And then a little bit of tactics with Fairy and Meteor Crush. So overall, I'm going to have to give their skill stat below average. It's not unusable. It's a 3-bar stat is still usable when it comes to skill. I'm just saying it's not the greatest in the world. But that's where we need to get into their brick stat. And their brick stat is kind of funny. They don't run any tribute monsters. They run a lot of special summon stuff. That's kind of nice. This is a stall card. That's kind of nice. Lots of cards to bring out stuff. You know what? The only brick cards I'm seeing are Earthquake, which is situationally good. Fairy Meteor Crush, which might be useless if you have Mad Sword Beasts. Muko, which is really situational, so that's not going to be the best, but it stops Pot of Greed and stuff, so that's kind of nice. Divine Wrath can be bricky, but I'm not going to say it is. Judgment of Anubis can be bricky. Overall, I'm going to give them a solid 7 bars. Almost a perfect brick stat of not bricking. They are a rarely bricks. This deck doesn't look like it's going to brick too often. You are usually going to draw the cards you need or draw cards that help you later on in the game. So overall, I could say that the Duel Giants brick stat is just 7 bars. They actually do have some potential here when it comes to drawing the cards they need. So overall, I actually like the Duel Giant. Attack stat, kind of mixed results, but still good enough. Defense stat, mixed results, but even better. Speed stat, actually pretty damn good. I gotta give it to him. Having Graceful Charity, Shallow Grave, Call the Haunted, Gillosaurus. I mean, Union Monster that bounces, second Goblin. That's kind of nice. They have some stall with Hollow Life Barrier. I could give them some skill stat for that. They have some special summoning. That's some skill stat for that. They're not going to win by skill, but they have it. That's something. Brick. They're probably not going to brick. Honestly, this is a deck that can win. I'm going to give it a 2.5 stars. This is a potential winner of the tournament. It's not going to be the easiest winner because if you drew all your second goblins, all your goblin calligraphers, all your goblin kings, it's going to be hard to win the duel. But you have a lot of stall and a lot of monster options that can, wall attack points and wall defense point options that can protect you. You got some pretty decent traps here to help you. Got some pretty decent spells here to help you. Overall, this is a decently balanced deck, and I think this is a balanced duelist. They got good attack and defense. The Duel Giant is perfectly in the middle, and I would love to give them an average potential for winning. I think they are 2.5 stars. A person that gets this deck, a subscriber that gets this deck, could technically win the tournament, in my opinion. And if you would like to try this deck out in the Subscriber Dynasty series, here you go. Look at all the stuff. You can win with this if you want. It's right there for the taking. Just go ahead and copy this deck card for card exactly the way I built it. So that's going to be it for the Duel Giant, everybody. I'm pretty excited for this character. I wouldn't mind getting them myself. I could actually make this deck work. Sure, there's some problems here and there, but I can make this deck work. So that's going to be it. Please remember to like and subscribe, and I'll see you all next time. Bye-bye.